Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Abington Board of Selectmen meeting September 25th, 2023. Time being exactly 6:30 p.m., I'd like to call the Board of Selectmen meeting to order. And as is tradition, we always start with the Pledge of Allegiance. And please continue to remain standing for a moment of silence for Albert T. Al Lyons. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We'd ask you to stand in a moment of silence for former firefighter Al Lyons. He was a 32-year member of the department. He retired as captain. He died suddenly last week. Al was, in addition to president of the local 2080, he was also very active in the muscular dystrophy fundraising as well as the Relay for Life. His wake was a week ago Sunday, and the active duty firefighters had a casket watch, and I want to commend the department, the regular members of the department, for remembering the retirees. And we would ask that you remember Al and his family, and that he be granted eternal rest.
Thank you. First items on our agenda are public announcements. We do have something from, so on part of our public announcements, we have Abington Celebrates Oktoberfest update. Abington Celebrates members couldn't be here tonight, so they did give us a little something for the residents to read. So the Abington Celebrates, the Abington Rotary Club, and the Abington Lions Club are thrilled to present Abington with a royal treat, Diana of Love. Diana of Love is a history at play event featuring a glimpse of the life of Princess Diana of Wales by Judith Carroll on Saturday evening, October 7th at 6:30 p.m. at the Abington High School. Tickets are $25 and are available on Eventbrite or at the town clerk's office downstairs. As for Oktoberfest weekend, save the date for upcoming Oktoberfest weekend, October 13th through October 15th. The events include Stein and Wine Paint Night, Oktoberfest Marketplace, Island Grove Walking Tour, Dyer Memorial Library Open House, Not So Scary Woods, Pumpkin Point, Not So Scary Woods, that will be at the Island Grove Park, Pumpkin Point and Movie Night, second annual Freaky Flea Market, an Oktoberfest family celebration, which will be out front on the Abington Legion and Frollo grounds. It is a weekend full of fun for all ages. For a full weekend schedule, visit Abington Celebrates on Facebook or Instagram or email at abingtoncelebrates@gmail.com. And the second public announcement we have, Mr. Chapin.
The Strawberry Valley Golf Course Committee is sponsoring an Abington Town Appreciation Day. They're offering a free round of golf to Abington residents. They're booking tee times from 8 a.m. to 3 p.m. on Sunday, October 8th. It includes 9 holes of golf, coffee, and donuts. To schedule your tee time, call 781-347-4877. The tee times are limited, so make sure you call in advance before they're booked up.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chapin. Public announcements, Mr. Donovan?
Pardon me, yes, Mr. Chairman, just a reminder to all the townspeople on Saturday, October 14th, we have our special town meeting beginning at 9 a.m. at Abington High School. There are only 5 articles on the warrant. I would ask that if you're not familiar with it, please do a little bit of research. There's been a lot of messages on cable TV in terms of the town manager's corner to inform people as it relates to both the fire station DPW project as well as the Union Point rezoning. The first article dealing with opiate will deal with that later on this evening, but Articles 2, 3, and 4 relating to the Union Point rezoning and Article 5 is the fire station DPW project. So with that, we would ask, we need a quorum of 150, and please, it's Saturday morning. If we get 150 there right at 9 o'clock, we can begin the process and hopefully dispense with business in an orderly fashion, so we won't take your entire day, hopefully only a couple of hours at best. So please remember that, and we really do need your attendance. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Donovan. Ms. Jesper, public announcements?
No.
All right, thank you. I do have one more public announcement. Just an informational reminder to residents who live in the Hancock Street, Chestnut Street area. MassDOT held a design public hearing on September 13th, 2023, regarding improvements at the intersection of Hancock and Chestnut Streets. For improved public safety, the preferred alternative will be a roundabout option at the Hancock and Chestnut Street intersection. Construction is estimated to begin in 2026. The roundabout option will slower speeds, equaling lower likelihood of injuries and fatalities, improve sight distance, soften the slope of the Hancock Street, improve topography, shorten pedestrian crossings, and more. MassDOT will be administrating the construction. Advance notices will be posted regarding the construction, including temporary short-term roadway and pedestrian detours. In the meantime, until 2026, to improve safety at the intersection, discussions with the DPW, discussions on additional signage and possible speed limit reductions and enforcement are being discussed. That is all I have for public announcements. Next, public comments. Any public comments from the audience? All right, hearing none. All right, we will go right into our action discussion items. First item on our agenda is vote to approve minutes of our September 11th, 2023 meeting.
Move we approve.
All right, thank you. There's a motion by Mr. Donovan, second. Ms. Jesberg, any other motions to be heard? All right, hearing none. All in favor of approving Selectmen minutes from September 11th, 2023? Aye?
Aye.
All opposed? Unanimous. Okay, perfect. Next on our agenda is get this one here. Request to hold the annual Abington High School Green Wave Boosters door-to-door fundraiser on Sunday, October 15th, 2023. Is there anybody here in the audience from the Abington Boosters who would like to speak? Right? Come on up, state your name and address, and tell us what you're doing.
Hi, my name is Joanne Pease, my address, 125 Mountain Laurel Lane. I'm the president of the Boosters, and I'm requesting permission to hold our annual door-to-door Booster-thon. It's our biggest fundraiser for the student athletes. All the money raised will go back to our student athletes programs, buying equipment that the school might not be able to purchase.
Okay, perfect. What were the times were you looking for?
It is 11 a.m. to 1 p.m.
Okay. Are there any questions from the board?
Okay.
All right.
I'll make a motion to approve the door-to-door booster drive on October 15th from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m.
All right, there was a motion on the floor. Is there a second?
A second.
All right, there is a second. Any other motions to be heard? All right, all in favor of Mr. Chapin's motion, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Unanimous. Congratulations. Thank you. Our next action discussion item is request to hold the 43rd Annual St. Patrick's Day Parade on Sunday, March 17th, 2024 at 1 p.m. We did receive a letter here from the chairman of the parade committee, Jack Bailey. Dear Selectmen, the Abington St. Patrick's Day Parade Committee would like to ask your permission to hold its 43rd Annual St. Patrick's Day Parade on Sunday, March 17th, 2024 at 1 p.m. Current plans call for the parade to begin on Washington Street in Abington Center. The route will follow Washington Street to Adams Street, to Route 59, to Route 139, taking a right onto North Ave to Railroad Street. The parade will turn onto Railroad Street to the New England Art parking lot to disband. We hope the Board of Selectmen will be able to participate and help us to make the St. Patrick's Day a big success. As always, we wish to thank you for your consideration and assistance. Sincerely, Jack Bailey, Parade Chairman.
I move we approve.
All right, there's a motion on the floor. Is there a second?
I'll second.
All right, second. Any other motions to be heard? Right. All in favor of the request to hold the 43rd Annual St. Patrick's Day Parade on Sunday, March 17th, 2024 at 1 p.m. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Unanimous. And keep up the good work, Mr. Bailey. Let's see. I know I'll definitely be there with my very green, sparkly shoes. Next on our agenda is a hazard mitigation update from our amazing Assistant Town Planner, Liz Shea. Liz, you have the floor.
Good evening. We are at the end of updating our hazard mitigation plan. The last update was in 2015. Before Sue Boakman left, she had applied for a grant. Then she left and I got it. So we did it with 3 other towns. We have opened the public comment period, which is why I'm here tonight. There's a copy of this in my office. There's a copy at the library. And there's a copy on our website. If anybody would like to read it and send me any comments, feel free to do that. The public comment period ends October 20th. What is a hazard mitigation plan? Everybody, Scott's so thrilled. Basically what it is, it's our natural hazards. We try to identify them and then come up with actions to try to mitigate them. At the end of the day, having an up-to-date plan entitles us to pre-disaster FEMA funds, should we need them. So it'll make grant applications easier, mostly for fire and police, and DPW, other public safety departments. So I would like to thank Lindsay Wright, John Stone, Jeannie White, Kelly Johnson, John Nuttall, and Paul Hunter for all their help. They dragged themselves to a lot of meetings about this and really deserve a big, huge round of applause. So that's it for me. Again, anybody can email their comments. Once this is done, it'll go off to FEMA for approval. When it comes back, I'll come back to you guys and ask you to adopt it officially. But the public comment period has started, and that's all I needed to do.
Can you just announce your email address? Just for yes.
It's lshay@abingtonma.gov.
Thank
Awesome.
you.
Thank you,
Or
Liz.
you can reach out to Scott, he'll get me.
Al Shea.
Thank you, Liz.
Thank you.
All right. Our next action discussion item is presentation by developers of Southfield Redevelopment Authority, New England Development, and Brookfield Properties. Come on up. State your name and the organization and what you're trying to do here.
Thank you very much. Mr. Chairman, thank you. My name is John Chuig from New England Development. I appreciate the opportunity to be here tonight. We have a brief presentation, but Mr. Donovan already told me to be brief. A lot of things on the agenda, so I certainly understand that. And I know some of you have attended some of our meetings that have been out in the community. What we thought we would try to cover tonight with a few things. A little bit about timeline. And it's kind of odd to start with the timeline on something, but we thought it would be helpful just to sort of understand every sort of level set where everybody's at and what we're doing and why. Talk a little bit about our master plan, sort of the vision that we've always had of this. Some of you have attended some of the meetings, sure I know you have sort of seen some of that, but talk a little bit of that. Touch on the zoning. We're not going to go through a zoning presentation. We did actually done that a few times. Certainly did it with your planning board, and last Thursday night, your planning board recommended favorably, so we were very excited about that. But we'll touch on that a little bit. Touch a little bit about infrastructure, because water and sewer, transportation, always issues that the community cares very much about. talk a little bit about fiscal, so what does it mean financially, and we're just going to touch on that. And then touch a little bit on open space. Open space in all the communities has been a major issue that people are concerned about. What's going to happen to the base? What's sort of the vision? What can we expect? How have you done working with natural heritage and some of the others? So we'll touch on that. That'll be our presentation tonight, and I'll probably go through that in a few slides, probably 10 or 15, just to give you a sense of sort of where we're at. A little bit of sort of who we are, for those of you who have not been with us. New England Development, Brookfield Properties. Again, my name is John Tewitt. Robert Pierce from Brookfield is here. Paulson Cotter is behind me from New England Development. I won't do the New England Development commercial, although I have done it before. A little bit about New England Development, founded by our chairman, Steve Carp, about 40 years ago. He's still our chairman. Originally, we were a regional shopping center company. We built about 50 million square feet here in New England and down to Florida. We sort of cover Maine to Florida. Originally, as I said, a regional shopping center company, sort of morphed out of that about 20 years ago, doing all kinds of mixed-use developments. There are 3 pictures up on the board that you can see on the screen there. The top one is Cambridge side. That is, if you know that, it's right on the canal near the Charles River. It's very cutting edge. When we did it 30 years ago, 3 levels down, 3 levels up. We've been converting it the past several years. One of the reasons we show that, if you go there on October 15th, the former Macy's building will be an 11-story lab building, which will be opening up mid-October. The Sears building, which Sears went the way of all flesh, is a lab building that will be opening up in about a month. And then we have approval to do a residential building, as well as keeping a lot of the retail there. We'll be doing the Canal Park. Total will be thinking of sort of what that space is from a mixed-use standpoint, because that's the days of a regional shopping center are very different than they used to be. People don't kind of go to a place and stay there for 4 hours. They want to try to combine trips. They want to do different things. In the bottom left there is a picture is Pine Hills, which I think a lot of people know. That's a project that we did about 3,000 acres, about 2,500 homes. We have about 500 homes to continue. And then the bottom right, which is a little bit blocked by the picture, a project that you may know called Westwood University Station, which is where the Amtrak is. That's a project we did about 2 million square feet. Again, very much mixed use, a lot of medical. We have a lot of retail. We have condominiums there. We have rental apartments. Again, and the reason we always talk about that project a little bit, it has a lot of similarities to the base. A failed project that promised a lot of infrastructure that was foreclosed on and had to be restarted. It actually has a lot of similarities to what we're doing. We started that, Paul and I did it about 10 years ago. We're almost up to 2 million square feet. We're doing our last part of that project, which is we'll be getting a Farmers New Cancer Center for brain cancer. That'll be the last piece that we have there. So that's a little bit about us. Brookfield Properties, depending on the day, first or second largest real estate company in the world, over $250 billion worth of assets. Not known to be around here. They sort of came up through New York and stopped. We're partnering with them. This is a joint venture with Brookfield. I won't go through our key consultant summary here tonight. Tim Sullivan, from a permitting zoning perspective, is here. But we have a very good team. This is a team we travel with. I have to say, some of these folks have been together about 20 years. So enough about us, just a little bit shaped up. What do we want to cover tonight? A little bit of timeline, as I mentioned, vision, infrastructure, fiscal, open space. And we actually put in the back of this presentation a couple of questions that we've been asked, and maybe we'll try to answer them tonight because we think it might be helpful as we're moving through. All right, process. What have we been doing throughout this year, I can tell you? Southfield Redevelopment Authority was sort of our first piece, getting through a redevelopment plan, zoning bylaw, a couple thousand pages of technical studies. They were approved by the Redevelopment Authority in March 15th and 29th of this year. We then went to Weymouth, and all of this is prescribed in the legislation. We're not changing the legislation or how it's governed. That's all prescribed. We have X number of days. We have to go to each community. You start with the zoning. It's not a great process, but it's one we inherited and what we do. Weymouth, we went through the Weymouth process. We were approved at the end of June. We did get unanimous approval from both the town council and from the planning board. Sort of July to September, sort of this period we've been in, getting ready for Abington and Rockland. Also been working with Natural Heritage on some of the open space issues. Also working with MIPA. Recently, as I mentioned, the Abington Planning Board favorably recommended us on the 21st. Now we're at the Abington Town Meeting, October 14th, Rockland Town Meeting on November 7th. So that's sort of our process. This is the framework in which we are operating right now. Okay. A little bit about the base. everybody knows what the base was. Pre-1940, it was Huckleberry Hill, it was farms, it was a pig farm, all kinds of things around it. That's not what's there today. But you can still see the base, even though this is a picture of the recent developments, which was sort of up in the top left-hand corner, and then you have the recplex sort of on the right. But the turnaround area for planes and dirigibles, the runways, the taxis, when you look at this plan, you sort of see a line in the middle. So everything north of that is Weymouth. Abington, there's a line that comes with diagonal on the left-hand side. That's the piece of Abington, total of about 179 acres, thank you, Paul, which is sort of right there. That's Abington. And that's where runways and taxiways are. And the remainder of a huge hangar that was there, and then Rockland on the other side. Most of the bases, it's 1,400 acres. Most of it is in Weymouth, second Rockland, and then a smaller piece in Abington. What's our big idea? It's really, we call it runways to greenways, maybe not the most imaginable thing to call it. But if you think about the space, and you think about what it was, and you look back even before World War II, so this northern open space, the southern open space, different areas of open space, the base all in the middle. The idea is, how do you connect the northern and southern open space? How do you take these runways, which are huge, thousands and thousands of feet long, 200 feet wide, 50 feet of pavement on each side of them that you don't even see as you walk out there? How do you take those? How do you make those connections? If you think about it for just orientation, that's the hangar that you see right there. The idea of taking these runways and turning them into greenways, which we can develop from. Always looking at, again, for orientation, you have Route 18 out here, coming back to 228, and the parkway that sort of cuts through the middle. But what's the logical thing? How to connect the north and the south again. And that's one of the sort of the basic things that we looked at, and I'm going to show you as part of the open space when we get to that. Zoning, that's actually what's in front of town meeting. You look at the current zoning map, is the map on the left. If you can understand that and tell me about the 32 different overlay zones, God love you. One of the first things that we heard when we got involved in this was from other people who looked to develop the base. We can't understand the zoning, we don't know what to do with it. The 32 different overlay zones, very complicated, very prescriptive in the sense of you must build in this trapezoidal shape, this type of use. I can tell you there's a reason this has failed 4 times. One of it is that. You can't do that. You can't ever guess where people are going to want to go, whether it be a commercial tenant or otherwise. Proposed zoning maps on the right, a simpler map. It protects and preserves what people have bought and built. The yellows, the orange, the pinky color, purpley color, maintained all that. The area that's sort of shown in the tan is the area that hasn't been developed. And then what we tried to do is wrap the entire base in green. Maybe put a permanent buffer all the way around it. And look at it in that way, so you're really only focused on developing that which is sort of in the middle. Process, as I mentioned, we went through the SRA, we've gone through Weymouth, we've now, obviously in Abington and Rockland. And that's a process that we've been through with the zoning. There was months of process developing the zoning, drafting it, having it peer reviewed, having it rewritten, that's the process that we've been through from the zoning perspective. Infrastructure, I'm just going to touch on it for a minute. The base is very challenged. Water, sewer, and transportation. Matters in Abington about water, we're looking at 2 different solutions. It's what we are required to study under our state approvals. One is the MWRA, different than ever has been the case before. Weymouth as a community is looking at MWRA water to bring water down. Speaker Mariano actually came down to a meeting in Weymouth, brought the MWRA, and is thinking about how do you get water down to the southern region. All the communities around here are challenged for water. This is not a new issue. So when you look at, we affectionately call this the spaghetti map, the idea of different routes from which the water for the MWRA, they have plenty of water. They have 100 million gallons a day extra water. But how do you bring it from the Blue Hills down to this region? And that's one of the things that we're putting in our state filing. We're working through the state. The 8 different routes are now down to 2. They'll go down to 1, and then determine how that has to move forward. The second is what we call the Aquaria routes. The city of Brockton, you may or may not know, has had a relationship with a desalinization plant down in Dighton. They pipe the water up to Brockton. Brockton doesn't use the water that it has available there. That's been the case. So we are also looking, and I'm required to study by the state, There is a pipe in that Brockton has that is on Route 18 next to Peaceful Meadows. It's a 36-inch pipe. And don't get me started about Peaceful Meadows and the sale because that's very sad. But put that aside, the idea of bringing a pipe straight up Route 18 to the base area. Those are the two things that we're studying. Both of those, which we know are of interest to Abington, because is there an opportunity, because we're going to bring a pipe, let's say, the Aquarium Group through Abington, a water pipe, is there an opportunity for water there to help Abington? Same with the MWRA discussions. You should know the MWRA, the SRA, the Southfield Redevelopment Authority, and Weymouth are co-applicants with that. So we're participating with the SRA on that. So a little bit about sewer. I won't focus on that. Obviously, there'll be sewer needs. Each community has some sewer challenges. Abington obviously mostly goes to the city of Brockton. So we're looking at that. What does that mean long term? That's also one of the things that we're studying. Transportation. You can see these yellow dots. It's over 70 intersections that we've studied. We've got about a 1,000-page traffic report. We've identified about 30 locations that have to be improved, either new signals, reconstruction, signal timing, or roadway widening. Everything we've looked at, and this is the big difference between the prior developers and how we've looked at it. This base has always been developed on the increment. Oh, I can get a little bit more water, I'll build another building. We are not looking at it that way. If we can't solve for all the water the base needs, all of the sewer it needs, and the transportation improvements, we will not go forward with the project. And we've said that publicly. We do mean it because we think it's a tremendous disservice if you try to do it just by the increment, and it doesn't solve the regional problems that we've had. That's also the other reason why this base has failed as many times as it has. So that's a little bit about some of the infrastructure. RKG analysis. What's that? RKG is a nationally known firm. They're actually based in New England. Mostly work for states and municipalities. We first met them when they were doing a project for a municipality that we were trying to develop. Very unusually from a fiscal standpoint. You oftentimes try to do a projection. What does this project mean for the community? And you're always projecting. You don't have base data. You don't really know exactly what's going to happen. Unusually here, we have a project. Base was partially built out. We can study exactly what the impacts were. So we hired RKG and we said, take a look at Weymouth, because it's a real world example of the kind of things that are built here in this place. Now you can say, well, Weymouth and Abington, they're different. Yes, but they're at the base, and it was a very good basis for us to then project what would happen in Abington, what would happen in Rockland. So a little bit about the base. 1,274 homes, that's what exists. Commercial space, about 2,400 people who live there. 25-acre sports complex. The total assessed value right now is about $400 million. The gross tax is about 5.3. There's some offsets to that. There's police costs, there's fire costs, there's school costs. There's some bond payments that Weymouth pays. But the net positive revenues every year to Weymouth, about $3 million. That's something that Weymouth Treasurer went through, Weymouth folks. There is no reason to believe that if, for example, you would develop a similar project, or partially being a similar project in Abington, obviously, in size, those are the kind of results. So we had a very strong base from which to analyze what could happen in Abington, which we did do. We then stepped back and we said, well, what would the Abington experience be? Now, we're commercial developers. That's what we do. We do some residential, our Pioneers project. Today, the world is a mixed-use world. But we asked them to do a study to say, well, what if it was mostly commercial? What if it was mostly residential in Abington? Give us a range of, and then figure out what the police costs would be, and the fire costs, the school costs would be. What would that range be? It was $4 to $5 million range of net dollars at full build-out available to Abington. There's Weymouth numbers, for example, is substantially more because obviously there was substantially more. But a few things, and I put some notes on this. When we talk about net dollars, they are net dollars after expenses, available for other needs of the community. We looked at commercial. One of the things that we heard a lot about was what are the school impacts? Obviously, if it's mostly commercial, very few school impacts. But what if it was mostly residential? We also looked at that. Now, realizing that this would be, if it was heavily residential, it would be residential and commercial. It would be over a 10 to 12 year period. And looking at the experience, for example, in Weymouth, total would be about 65 students spread out over 12 grades, probably over a 10-year period. Just to give you a sense of the type of impacts you can see. But in any instance, all of these are fiscally positive to the community. No matter how you look at it, even if you have to adjust. And again, those were numbers after adjusting for police and fire, general municipal costs, cost of the library, cost of town hall, just to give you a sense. Open space. Open space has been a big discussion as we've gone through this. We met with the Open Space Committee. We had a lovely sidewalk for 3 hours in the rain, as we've had this season. I guess here, I'm giving you, rather than the 10 pages on open space, I'm giving you this summary. At the end of the day, we're proposing 2/3 of the site is open space, about 885 acres. Virtually everything that you see in green on the base here would either be open space or restricted through the Natural Heritage Program. 519 acres being restricted, because remember, you have a lot of habitat out there, you have grassland habitat, heavily in Rockland, but also down here in Abington. There was a golf course proposal that was in the prior development. We would eliminate that, because one thing that comes with the golf course is they called that open space. A big hunk of it was in Abington. Yes, but you have clubhouse, you have pathways, you have privatization, you have parking lots. So we would eliminate the golf course. The golf course was go in this area here. Contiguous habitat, very different. The restrictions that exist today sort of are in this area, a little bit over here. We would make all of this contiguous restricted land. When dealing with natural heritage, the folks who do that kind of thing, they like the contiguous land because guess what? Turtles don't go in the same location all the time. We have the second largest habitat of eastern box turtle anywhere in the Commonwealth that's currently monitored. The need for grasslands. But there's a lot of work to create that. If you go out there today, you're going to see debris piles that are 14 feet tall along the runways. All of those have to be taken down. This has to be made contiguous. We think this is probably the best open space restricted land plan that's ever been kind of put forward for this site. Just to give you a sense, just to recap, what you see there in brown has already been developed. What you see there in sort of the orange, light orangey tan color, those are the areas we could develop in. Everything in green would be protected. That's what the open space story is for the base. To give you a sense, they disturbed 900 acres of this site when the Navy built out the base. We're going to protect 885. Kind of give that folks an example.
John, could I just pause you for a moment? We're trying to get one of our board members on the Zoom. He's with us virtually.
Okay?
So just pause just for a quick second. Sorry about that.
That's all right. That's all right.
Should be just where it says plumbing.
Yeah, it should be.
It says
If
general.
you convert
Text.
Yes? Yeah, it says-
Kevin, Kevin, are you there?
Okay, well, it's not there, it's not there.
we're getting levels on which.
All right, Kevin, are you there? All right, I'm getting a text message from him right now. Yep, he's there.
Okay.
All right, thank you. Thank you, everyone. Sorry about that. John, go right ahead.
Absolutely.
Put up the presentation. Thank you.
Let's make it a little smaller.
There we go. There we go. The magic hands.
All right, thank you.
Now we get a wash. Well, that's a whole different thing. My eye's not that good. All right, there we go. All right. A little bit about, I talked to you a minute about the open space. This is, our benefits from a selfish standpoint. But we think this is the kind of work we do. Plain communities is the kind of work that Brookfield does. We are looking at it as a total package, create a place. One of the things, we had 700 people who lived there today sign a petition to support our project. One of the biggest things that they said to us was we never got the place that we thought we were going to get. We never got the improvements that we thought we were going to get. And they have the security issues there that are significant. When you have a space with hundreds of acres of paved areas, you get all kinds of things to go on out there. And I know, Jake, you've heard me recount some of these, but Brazilian Kite Festival, which is a wonderful event, but it is, one might say, an excuse to drink for the day. But people who come onto the base, no permits, no approvals, and they just do different things. Everything from a driver lawnmower racing, where they come with flatbeds and unload and then race up and down the taxiway. The base has suffered from several years now of not having anyone who's in charge of the development. The SRA has done the best that it could, and more than it has. But when no one is developing it, no one's caring for it, these are things that happen. We think we can address that. Virtually every permit and approval that Elstar, the former owner, had has either expired or defaulted. We have to redo every local, state, and federal. The escrow account that deal with natural heritage, that dealt with the turtles and all that, all been defaulted on and all not paid. So we have to go back, and we are in the process of doing that. The infrastructure challenges are significant. Bring water and sewer to the site, providing some opportunities for Abington for some of that water, reconnecting the open space and the permanent buffers, which we would like to do. Yes, there's flexibility as far as commercial and residential development. I can't tell you today how much commercial is going to be, how much residential, exactly where it's going to be. I can't tell you it's one of the reasons the project failed. By trying to dictate and to say, oh, it's definitely going to be here. There's no way in a project like this. And we've been in projects for years. I showed you Cambridge side. I started Cambridge side. I was a child in 1987. And we still have it. We still run it. And we still reimagine what it can be. And that's the kind of commitment that you have to make in this project. And as I mentioned, some positive fiscal benefits, not insignificant on a net basis to Abington. A little bit about questions, and I know I'm testing everybody's eyesight right now. But a couple of things. And the reason we're just going to hit like a half dozen of these, because there were things that were mentioned to us that we just wanted to kind of set the record straight a little bit. There's all kinds of discussion about a new access drive through Spruce Street that's going to cut up through where the turtles are and come into the base. The answer to that is no. There was never any intention to that. By the way, the state and natural heritage would never even allow it. That is just something that somebody said to, quite honestly, get people very worked up about potential impacts to the business. Not true. Second thing, is there intention to have a new access road base to service Abington? Right now, we're focused on Trotter and Shea Memorial Boulevard and not creating new access space. Yes, there is a crossing, and those are where everyone knows. And from an emergency access standpoint, we're certainly going to work with the fire chief if that's appropriate. But when you do your time studies, there's no reason to actually alter that. Governance, we put the fancy title for what we talk about. But we've been asked here in this room, questions about planning and zoning and conservation. The SRA, South Florida Redevelopment Authority, and Mr. Luke is here, he's your representative in the Redevelopment Authority. It's a board of 9 members made up of the communities and in specific groups, run the base. They have the planning board, the zoning board, the conservation commission, they have a staff, they hire specialized consultants to do the work. That is not changing. That's exactly what it has been. That's what the legislation says. Because it is, again, it's a creature of the federal government. This was a federal base, and the Navy is still involved. We're still working with the Navy on dewatering, cleanups, and all kinds of issues. So that hasn't changed. But that all said, one of the questions we had here about the planning board was, well, Conservation Commission regulations, they still apply. Of course they do. The local Abington building inspector and electrical inspector, plumbing inspector get to inspect and issue building permits, certificates of occupancy. Absolutely. None of that has changed. It's the same setup it has always been, and how it will be going forward. We're not looking to change any of that. How's it served by water today? Weymouth. All the site is in Weymouth. It will continue to be served the parts in Weymouth. I talked to you a little bit about the alternatives that we're looking at for MWRA and for Clear. Sewer, same thing. Weymouth is MWRA and sewer. We're also looking at other opportunities as we go forward. We had a lot of questions about residential and 40B. One thing you should know that the legislation does not allow a 40B on the base. So 40B cannot be done there. But that all said, the legislation also does require that 10% of the housing, any housing bill, must be either affordable or workforce housing. And right now the base that has been built is about 12%, just to give you a sense of what that is. But it's not a 40B, it's allowed. So those are just a couple of questions that people asked, 4 or 5 times have asked about that we wanted to cover. So with that, I'll stop and turn it back to you.
All right. Thank you, John. First, I do want to say thank you for this presentation and coming before us, our planning board, our open space, and really having a transparent communication with our municipality. But I did want to mention on one thing. I do appreciate you mentioning the history behind New England Development and Brookfield properties, because I think it's so important. Because hearing from a lot of residents, it's like, okay, this is gone. We have tried to do something with this 4 times, and so it's exhausting. But I want to express my appreciation to you and your company. That thank you for your commitment for this project, and finally seeing through with something with Union Point, the Southfield Redevelopment Authority. I do have one question. Actually, I have a couple that read from residents and myself. If this is approved at town meeting, and with the commercial or residential in the area, the Southfield Redevelopment Authority, what would be the financial impact to DPW, to police, fire, and to schools?
We did a study, which is the RKG study. I just did a little summary of it, but it's a multi-page study that went through and looked at if it's more commercial, more residential, what are the impacts of police. We determined we had the 2021 call volume, we have updated 2022 call volume to look at police and fire. We looked at schools and said, what is the Abington's around 14,000 plus or minus, the state contribution, right into the weeds, what's variable cost, how many students. We looked at what was the Weymouth experience based on their number of units, and that's how that number was developed. But each one of those categories, police and, as I recall, police and fire for Abington, that full build-up could be over $1 million. There were dollars associated, obviously, with school children. One can argue the school children issue, and I would think the best indicator is probably what is, especially given housing that you build today. And if I was up here talking to you 10 years ago, and most people in their mind would talk about, 3, 4 bedroom homes, and they're going to have X number of kids, and this is what it's going to be. That has changed. That has changed by how we live today. That changed by the number of children that we have. That changed even by the recession that we had in 2008, where children were born between 2008 and 2012, which has affected some of our schools and the like. And the type of family units, it's just very, very different. The school children counts are very different. But we looked at all of those costs. So the number that you see in the net, it's fully set forth in the report, is to say, and even looking at general government costs. What's it cost to run a town meeting? And if you have more people in the town, okay, that's going to be an attributable cost. So that's how we built a model. The advantages, we had Weymouth as an example, but we also looked at what's Abington's tax rate, what is Abington assessed to, and we sort of looked at all those things to try to come up with, all right, what do we think the costs are going to be? We think we overstated the cost and understated the revenue. I've said this before, it's true, you sort of want to under-promise and over-deliver. I'll give you my Westwood example. We promised $7 million in annual revenue, it's about 11 today. And that's just sort of how we look at how you want to present it. We never want someone to come back to us 5-10 years later and say, gee, you said X. Then we got Y and did what you said we were going to build. So I think all of those costs which are set forth in the report, we think that in full build out. But the other thing that we don't really have today is I can't tell you exactly what we're going to build, where. But that's why we tried to do a sensitivity analysis to say every commercial. We identified 3 major commercial sites on the development. One of them is in Abington, over near the railroad tracks. One in Rockland, closer to 228, one in Weymouth, and then Trump area. Our sense is they're going to be more of a commercial development. A commercial development for school children, it impacts very, very low, also low for police and fire, compared to residential impact. But we try to look at your call volume, look at your budgets. That's how you develop it. So much longer winded explanation. But no, that's how.
Yeah.
So we come up with dollars and cents to each one of those things. So when we show that, okay, we think it's going to be in this range, and again, it's not perfection. It's a range, but it's a range informed by maybe a project and what we anticipate.
All right. So,
Before you do that, getting complaints that the mic keeps fading in and out for the people at home. So I don't think it's you, I think it's in the control room. Apparently all of them.
Yeah, I've switched out the mics that I can right now. So the mics as they are should be good.
Okay.
okay. Thank you. Is there any one in particular?
It was the 2 mics that I've swapped out for you.
Okay. All right. Thank you. So the net dollars that goes into so the public services goes into account for the net, correct?
Yeah, when you we kind of go to, so we built Weymouth as an example. I know Weymouth's not accurate, to give you an idea. We figure out potential number of homes, amount of commercial space, looked at the tax rate in Abington, which you normally assess. And the only thing we can use is today's rates and the like. And you figure out, well, okay, if you built this type of, what would you have for assessed value? What would be the rate? What do you have for costs? I think the Abington costs, for example, were higher as far as police and fire than what was experienced in Weymouth. So we sort of built that into it. You don't get to go to bond payments, so we built that into it. Gives you a sense of how you build the model. So police is in there, fire is in there, general costs and schools.
Okay.
Those are the 4 things that sit in the computation. The current assessment value, how you assess values. That's also, that's where that number that you see there, that's how that number.
Okay. Thank you, John. Any other questions from the board?
Yes, if I could. A couple of things, if I could, John. One, I'd like to go back to the water and sewer, specifically on the water with the MWRA. And when you look at, from a regional standpoint, I would agree with the speaker. I think that the South Shore is in desperate need of water to abate the situation, especially down county as it relates to Silver Lake and having all sorts of technical problems here today.
Right.
Here,
Can I
do
just-
this.
As I indicated, I agree with the speaker in terms of bringing water down to the South Shore. I think the question, because if you look at, we just don't have any additional water. And the question becomes is, with Brockton at Silver Lake, and then you've got Big Sandy and so forth, the county towns obviously are going to feel, starting to feel the drain with the Jones River and Kingston and so forth and so on. So I think that is a very prudent move. I guess the question that I would have to you, as I understand it, and correct me if I'm wrong, if you were to opt, or if the state opts to write legislation to help subsidize bringing the MWRA to the base, am I correct in assuming that the base then would have the ability to use MWRA water? Abington and Rockland would have the ability to access it, but not if they needed additional water, but it wouldn't be something that would be hooked through the Abington-Rockland system currently.
That's correct.
Okay. As it relates to going further on that, if we could just spin off a little bit on the open space issues. A couple of things I want to shine a further light on, if I will. Back in 1998, when the original legislation was put into place and it was amended in 2014, the language relating to the governance have not changed. So the governance of the Southfield, at the time South Shore Tri-Town Development, and then ultimately the Southfield Redevelopment Authority, the language for administration of permitting and so forth has been the same since 1998. And I want to quote from it just to further realize the importance of it. Under Section 6 of the current law, the authority shall have all the powers necessary or convenient to carry out the provisions of this act, including the power to administer land use, subdivision, zoning, and wetland protection controls and associated permitting. So the question that has come up on a couple of the meetings before the planning board and other public hearings was, did the Abington Conservation Commission and the like have authority over there? Well, that question has been answered since 1998. It's embodied in the administrative structure of now the Southfield Redevelopment Authority, of which the town of Abington has an appointee that represents our interests on that board, which is a government agency. So the Wetlands Protection Act is a state law. It's the same law that applies to Abington, South Weymouth, Springfield, Leominster, anywhere in the Commonwealth. So that fear not that the administration of the Wetlands Protection Act is currently embodied in the provision of law that's protected. Secondly, I want to mention that recently, I think it was last week, the SRA transferred pretty much a lot of we call them FOST, which is the Navy term to transfer land that was under their control to the Redevelopment Authority. Currently, there are about 44 acres remaining that are still none in Abington, but still need to be cleaned up. Now, I did lastly, and I just want to highlight this because I think it's important. When I was working at the base, and then later on I was one of the first directors in 1998, and then I served the town of Abington as a director, and I was chief executive officer over there. I had worked very closely with the Navy Department in terms of transferring the property. And I took the liberty the other day to reach out to Greg Preston, who is now the director of the BRAC office within the Navy down in Philadelphia. Greg and I worked very closely, so I wanted to, A, catch up with him, and B, ask him the question in terms of Navy's oversight. And I just want to read a passage that he sent to me, that they were going to take monies that were accrued from the sale of property there to put in a fund so that the Navy or the developer could clean up the PFAS that's there. And this is part and parcel. He says, however, to be very clear, Navy has also built-in protection such that if we are not happy with the performance of the cleanup effort, we can and will cancel the agreement and hire a new contractor to manage the effort, meaning the Navy's maintaining control. Our focus is geared toward ensuring the issue is properly handled. On the positive side, the developer agrees with us and is properly incentivized to perform the tasks at hand in an effective and efficient manner. Bottom line is, I think we're in a good place moving forward through the redevelopment process, build out of the project. Frankly, better than most. I'm touting Weymouth's setup as a model for other bases to consider as they move forward with their redevelopment. Now, this particular BRAC office handles everything from Maine down to Florida, Puerto Rico, out to the middle of the United States. So when Greg says to me that he's holding up the agreement that he has with you in terms of regulatory authority, that gives me comfort knowing that not only is the Navy having a watch eye on it, but also behind the Navy is the EPA. So again, to the people that were concerned about regulatory compliance, I think that answers very, very nicely those questions. And lastly, I want to state that I from my standpoint, I've been in this since the base closed in 1996 in a variety of positions, and I see my friend Peter Foreman here. We go back years. The only thing that's changed is our titles and our age. You know, we've lived this, you know, for these many years, and I think it's something for the region. It was originally touted, and that was when the base closed. The idea of transferring land that the Navy had, it was for economic development. And I firmly believe, and I was on the SRA when we hired New England Development and Brookfield Properties, I fully feel, after the complete vetting that was done, that we finally have a developer with credibility and experience in both residential and the commercial market with highly successful projects in their portfolio that I am extremely confident that they will be able to move forward with it. And that is the reason, obviously, with the administrative controls that are in place, that the caliber of the people that are developing it, that I feel confident that finally, we in Abington would be able to hopefully maintain some economic development in terms of tax revenue from the base. So with that very short presentation, I will, hopefully my friend Peter will get up and say something.
Any comments from the board? Mr. Damasio, was there any input?
Oh, lost.
Any comments or questions from the public? No comments or questions from the public. John, I do have probably $1 million question here. Worst case scenario, what happens if Abington and or Rockland do not approve of the new proposed zoning at their town meetings?
In all likelihood, we won't go forward. I don't see it, because the way the legislation is structured, all three communities have to approve the zoning as a unified effort. In order to deal with all the issues that we have, whether it be state approvals, natural heritage, dealing with the Navy, development opportunities, if Abington and Rockland aren't there, I don't see us going forward. I hate to say that.
Yeah.
We will have spent several years and tens of millions of dollars, but that has happened before.
Yeah.
But I think we really do need the structure of the legislation as such. And I think also on a state level, the state is looking to see that the community support this. I think the Navy is looking, as Donovan talked about, I think we spent a year working with the Navy to keep the money on the base to be able to do some of the dewatering and dealing with PFAS. I think that's very important. And quite honestly, the development community. A lot of people in the development community don't believe in this project. They don't think that it's failed so many times. And the last one was sort of a spectacular fail. And, you know, all Canada dealt with fraud and, you know, $60 million worth of monies that was spent and nothing happened, all kinds of different things. That the development community is very leery. I think we've got a lot of interest. People want to work with us. People want to build here. Paul and I, we're one of the largest commercial, industrial, warehousing type developers, builds most manufacturing buildings on Thursday. Knows the base well. But one of their biggest caveats is they have a lot of confidence because they've seen what we do and have done. But they're very leery about, is this going to work? So I think if the communities were not to vote for it, I think as troublesome as that would be in the legislation and to the state, it would send a real message to the development community that this is a problem.
And also, I think the question too is, not only is it a benefit to Abington, but it's a benefit to the region as a whole.
Yes.
Because if you have people living over there, obviously coming to the restaurants and so forth and so on, you're going to have an influx from an economic standpoint across the board, not only in Abington, but for the region as a whole. So I think it goes back to what the original intent was when the base closed.
Back on top, one of the first things we promised that we would do is to build a town center here. Won't be terribly large, but it would have retail and other. There's no place on the base, if you think about it, almost 2,500 people live there. They get a cup of coffee, that's a cup of coffee breakfast. I mean, it doesn't sound like much, but placemaking is critically important for long-term success. And we know, so I have that here, so it's one of the first things we promised we would do, even though financially it won't be really to anyone's advantage, but it will be for placemaking.
To piggyback off what Mr. Donovan said and what you said too, John, I think this is one of part of the reasons I'm sitting on this board is I wanted to see some development on Abington's land of the Southfield Redevelopment Authority, and because I think it would bring in tremendous revenue for the town, and a great attraction to the region and for people to come to Abington. I think this is what the SRA has and New England Development and Brookfield properties have presented to us, to the three municipalities, is a huge step forward. And I know I already said this before, but I have great confidence in your development. We were promised things for years. I remember I was in high school when one of the older developers came before our town meeting and promised everyone in town and says, "Oh, it's going to be 100% commercial, industrial, and you're going to have a stadium, you're going to have a movie theater." And it truly, for me, I appreciate the honesty of what really the process is for this, and having it put down to whether it's 75% commercial and 25% residential or vice versa. I think this is absolutely great. And one of the things that is, I know it's important to a lot of residents, and you touched upon it, the importance of open space, and what we can see from your plans here, that there is a true commitment to open space and preserving, habitats and the species that live there. I think this is a winning sell for the town of Abington. I really, truly do.
I have to agree with Mr. Chair. I mean, I appreciate the commentary. This is what we do. We think we can deliver on this. It's very difficult. We have a lot of challenges left. We got to solve the water. We got to solve the sewer issues. When you look at the open space plan that's up there, people say, well, how do we know that? This is what we presented to Natural Heritage. It's the same plan. And right now, Natural Heritage has a restriction that was since 2009, which is still in place, that restricts most of the Abington and Rockland land for no development with habitat. That exists today. Part of our discussions with them is to allow some opportunities so that there'd be some land for development.
Can I ask a specific question about open space, because I know some residents have reached out to me. There's some questions about a meadow or something over in the open space area. So what the protection for that?
That meadow is off of Spruce. It's down in Rockland. It's not in Abington. There's a picture floating around about the meadow. The meadow is down. That is all in protected open space. In fact, right about here is where the man-made box turtle habitat has been created. If you go on the base, it sits around here. All of that area is protected. None of it. The meadow. But here's what's wrong with the meadow. Make sure you go down. I'll go down the road just for a minute. When you go back, I'll go to the picture that shows the wrong. If you ever go out there and actually look, and you think about it, now the meadow, I'm going to show you about where the meadow is. As I mentioned, it's down here. But you've got runways that come down and taxi with them. Go out and look at those runways. 14 feet tall, thousands of cubic yards of debris, broken up pavement. People would come in with dump trucks and just dump things there. I don't know what we're going to find when we actually go through some of those. But habitat is, that meadow as habitat, if the state was sitting here right now and we were on a site level, they would say to you, all very, very low quality. Because habitat is about grassland, it's about open space. I'll probably go to maybe not that one, even some of the one back. Yeah, no, the one that you had right before. If you look at that, from here in Abington, all the way down, here and here is full of debris. That's where all the junk is. The meadow is down here. But they would tell you, Chris from Natural Heritage, who's a wetland scientist, he would say that's very, very poor quality, that meadow. Because birds need 100 acres, they don't want predators, and they see the debris piles as that's where predators are. So they want to actually use this habitat. So we have to take all of this material out to open that up. Our program is to create 104 acres of grassland meadow all through there. That's actually taking care of the environment and dealing with grassland meadow habitat. The meadow in and of itself, if Chris was standing here right now, he would say very low quality. I would consider that really habitat or any because they won't land here, they won't nest here, because there's too much trees, there's too much of the debris piles around where predators are. Open this all up, you've actually created habitat. That's our plan.
Oh.
That's not been part of this before.
Thank you, John. One more. I think one more question for me. If Abington and Rockland were to approve these proposed new zoning changes, you talked a lot about water. What would be the time frame for either the MWRA or Aquaria?
Two different time frames. MWRA water is a longer time frame because if you think about MWRA, Weymouth and the base actually filed, and they're working on right now, file an application to become part of an MWRA community. So both the base and Weymouth. That process goes through, then you have to go through the meet the state process because of the interbasin transfer, which is a fancy way of saying the water comes out from the western part of the state, but the sewer goes somewhere else. So it goes from one basin to another, so you have to actually get that approved. You then have to permit running about 7.5 miles to 8 miles worth of pipe from the Blue Hills down to this area. A pipe that can hold millions of gallons of water. You have to pipe into the system to be able to do that. And then you have to actually build a pipe. A couple of years to build that. So when you think about what that means is you get your water up here, you got to bring it down to this region, now not necessarily at the base, but into the system there. You have to do all that. Depending on who you want to listen to, 6 to 8 years to do that. Bring that water down. Now, what do you do in the interim? Because we don't want to wait 6 to 8 years. We want to finish development and permitting through next year, so we can start probably in 2025. Weymouth does have some water. We'll talk to them about the interim opportunity. And they do have sufficient water that we can actually start the project. And currently, the base is a customer of Weymouth. That's how you move forward. Okay, hard stop, end of water. Then you look at Aquaria. Aquaria's a little bit different. There's a desalinization plant that is actually obligated to sell water over and above its only existing customers, the city of Brockton. They have the ability to be able to produce up to 5 million gallons with certain improvements in the plant. Brockton doesn't need that. Currently, in the last 4 months, it's taken no water. So there's an opportunity. There's an existing 36, as I mentioned, 36-inch pipe right down there at Peaceful Meadows. It's a straight shot into the base area. We have met with Aquaria. That is an agreement that deals with Aquaria and the city of Brockton. Also an interbasin transfer, because again, you're going to take water that comes out of the Tom River, and you're going to bring it up through here. It gets discharged differently. But if you think about it, and this will put it in the vernacular, where would you rather run a pipe? The Blue Hills down here by South Shore Plaza and then down here, or the beautiful Whitman and Abington straight up to this. A little bit different, much shorter time frame. Regulatory framework is a little bit different, shorter. We think that is probably more 4 years than 60. That's where we're at, but they both come with different issues. We need to bring water down to the South Shore region. MWRA has plenty of water. I don't want to say unlimited supply, but they literally send 100 million gallons over the transom that nobody's buying. So, longer term makes a lot of sense to do. Aquaria may solve Abington, base, these regions with a small problems. But we're required to study both and we're actively pursuing both because they both have advantages. I have to tell you in all candor, it could be that Weymouth as a community may vote not to go forward. I mean, so we have to pursue both because that could happen. Will it happen? One of the reasons the SRA is a co-applicant. And that's why we're funding that. Because we have to pursue that opportunity, both of them. So Aquaria is more focused, shorter time frame, less parties to deal with. MWRA, more regional, solves a lot of issues, has a lot of state support. Both of them.
All right, any other questions from the board? All right, any comments from or questions from the public?
Okay, pending that, Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion that the Board of Selectmen go on record as recommending favorable action on Articles 2, 3, and 4 in the special town meeting warrant relating to the rezoning of Union.
Do we want to wait for that article? We'll wait for
No,
that
I think
vote?
we can do it. I made a motion if somebody wants to
Is there a second? All right, there is a motion on the floor by Mr. Donovan. Any other motions to be heard? All right, so the motion on the floor is to the Board of Selectmen vote in favor of special town meeting warrant articles 2, 3, and 4. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Mr. Donovan? I mean, not Mr. Donovan, Mr. Damasio? Do we have him? Oh, we all lost him? Okay, so unanimous. All right.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. All right, next on our action discussion items on our agenda is the Water Department operational update from the Abington-Rockland Joint Waterworks amazing water superintendent, Crystal Cameron. We have Crystal here with us. Come on down and...
How are you?
Good, how are you?
Thanks. Thanks for having
Thank you for being here.
Oh, there you are. Sorry. I think you already signed that, so. So I'm assuming everybody wants an update on the PFAS plant.
Giddy up.
I have all kinds of updates
Awesome.
for all different things. So. For the PFAS plant, we are in the midst of bidding. So usually when you're dealing with bidding, it runs for about approximately 3 months from beginning to end. So we're looking at awarding probably sometime in October for the bidding. So we've already done the pre-qualifications that were necessary for the Hannigan plant. That's already done, so we can kind of be ahead of the game for that. We have ARPA funding for the PFAS vessels already taken care of, half coming from Rockland and half coming from Abington. $500,000 for those, which is fantastic. So that's already done. We've already have a vendor for that, Calgon Carbon. And then, as far as the SRF loan, we're still, there was some issues with that, but it was more of a federal thing. But, I think it's, all in all, it's worth it. It takes a little bit longer, but it's worth it because you get the 0%. And then loan forgiveness as well.
Okay.
When normally it could be a 2%.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. At that amount would be rather large amount of money. So recently our PFAS, our most recent PFAS testing came back higher than we'd like. We're still trending right around the same numbers that we normally are. Our most recent test that was done in August on the 30th came back at 26.8, unfortunately. So anything over 20 is a violation. So you're looking for that 3-month average. So right now we have 2 results for quarter 3. So once we get the 3rd result, we'll average that.
What was that number again?
So I'll give you the first 4. So for quarter 3, we did one test on the 28th of July, which came back at 24.1. And then the second test was done on the 30th of August, and it came back at 26.8. So once we get the third result, we'll average all three and then hope to be below 20. However, I don't believe in those numbers that's
Yeah.
going to happen. So unfortunately, I think we'll be mailing out more postcards. But once we get the PFAS plant online, we'll be in better shape. I think it's important to note that Abington residents, are less affected by the PFAS coming out of Rockland, which, I've tried to get out the information in multiple interviews and in the newsletters and things like that. The Hingham Street Water Treatment Plant is in Rockland. That stays pretty local to that area. Abington is, primarily serviced by Great Sandy Bottom Water Treatment Plant and Myers Ave Water Treatment Plant, which are far below the limit for DEP, which is 20.
If I could, Crystal,
Sure.
in terms of, because we've had so much rain, how are the reservoirs now? Are they pretty much full?
They're coming up.
Okay.
Yep, we're feeling much better about the levels now. We were pretty nervous for a while, but they're slowly coming up.
Okay, you're expecting a lot of snow.
Yeah, we're getting some snow. Farmer's Almanac said so we'll see. That's where we really get our recharge from. So. It's the snow. So, the last few years we really haven't gotten all that much, so we felt that, unfortunately. Any other questions?
Oh, I have a question. Is there, if residents were wondering if they wanted to get water at is there, I'm probably not even saying it right, like a spout or something at the Joint Waterworks department building? Yes.
Yes. So, per the regulation, if you're not meeting the 20 parts per trillion regulation, you have to provide the public with another source of water. It's what the regulation says. So we mulled over a ton of different ideas on what the best way to provide that other source of water to the public was. So some communities have done bottled water. A lot of them have now since stopped doing that because they found, the waste from the plastic has been, it's just not good. It actually kind of was counterproductive to their budgets. That, and then we could do what's called the big water buffalo, which is like a tanker truck, and people could come but then you wonder, gee, how long is that water sitting in that, and who's going to monitor it, and just, you want turnover in that tank. So that we kind of threw it, and then where was the best place to put it, local to everybody. And then we thought about, well, we had this hydraulic model done, and it basically tells you where the water comes and where it goes out of each treatment plant. And we have a perfectly good source coming out of Great Sandy Bottom and Pembroke, which the levels coming out of Sandy Bottom for PFAS are well below 10, which is great. And so we said, well, if the hydraulic model can prove that the water hydraulically is coming from Sandy Bottom and going straight to the office, why not put a tap there? It saves money for the budget. It wouldn't end up, going back onto the resident. We could save that there too. The waste would be completely down. And it actually, we were able to prove that the water hydraulically comes from Great Sandy Bottom.
Oh, that's awesome.
So it was great. Yeah, it worked really well.
When can residents access that?
From 8 a.m. To 3 p.m. Monday through Friday.
Okay, perfect. Awesome.
Yeah.
Any other questions from the board? Any questions from the audience? Let me see. Let's see if there's that was one question I wanted to ask, because a lot of seniors have been asking me. As for the water, when the PFAS levels are above the 20%, is it safe for Abington residents to consume it or to cook with it?
So getting back to Abington really doesn't get the water that is in question for the most part. The water that Abington is given comes from Great Sandy Bottom Pond in Pembroke and the groundwater facility in Abington, actually, with that's Myers Ave. that treatment facility actually did have PFAS, and it actually had more PFAS in the raw there than it did in the one in Rockland, believe it or not. But the tricky thing about retrofitting treatment plants is it's easier to retrofit a groundwater treatment plant, like the one in Abington, than it is a surface water treatment plant, which is the one in Rockland. So we were able to take that down, take one filter out of service, put the media in that PFAS responds to, and then put it back online. It took us about 10, 11 months to get that all up and running. But there's actually PFAS treatment in that treatment plant now.
Oh,
so,
wow.
It's great. So when you see us put in for articles for media or carbon media replacement, that's what it's for. So that we can actually, because once that media gets exhausted with PFAS, because the PFAS stays attached to the media, it's considered hazardous waste. So we have to get rid of it and then physically replace it. So Abington residents really don't get but I know people question, why do we get the postcards? Why do we, hear this information? Why don't you just give it to the people that, get the water in Rockland? And the reason for that is we have an interconnected system. It's not, gated off where just the water stays in Rockland and in that area. It can go anywhere if something happens catastrophically. So like say there was a big water main break, hydraulics changed. We want everybody to understand that there's a possibility, and it's a very slim chance, but just because of that slim chance, everybody should know that, this is what's going on. But primarily that water stays in Rockland, in that corner, over by Home Depot, and that area of town.
Oh, okay. All right. Thank you, Crystal.
Thank
Any, I do just want to say that thank you for giving us these updates and for everything that you and your department and the commissioners continue to do. I know it's not an easy job, and I know there's a lot of yelling and screaming on Facebook or social medias, but thank you for everything that you do to keep everybody safe and trying to, bring those PFAS levels down. And one thing definitely in particular that I wanted to thank you for. I love all the social media that's coming out that you're given to Scott and to Sam, to the town, to put up on social media to keep people informed about water and what's being done at the treatment center. Thank you very much. I know it's very much appreciated.
Thanks, Alex. I appreciate that.
Keep up the good work.
We actually have a brand new website going to be kicking off soon too, so that'll help a little bit too, because I know our website was hurting for a little while, so we'll get some new stuff coming down.
Awesome. Love to hear it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks.
All right. Let's see. Next action discussion item is vote by Board of Selectmen on bonds for capital projects. Scott?
Lindsay, those are good ones. Probably,
I move the approval of the vote of municipal bond for $2.8 million. They were voted on at town meeting April 4th of 2022 and approved.
And Mr. Chairman, I move that we authorize the execution of bonds for previously approved projects, the capital projects including the library roof, Randolph Street design, sidewalk, plow bucket truck, and paving bonds for Plymouth and Linwood, as previously approved by town meeting, and now it has to go out on the market.
All right, there's a motion by Mr. Donovan. Is there a second?
I'll second.
There's a second. Anything else to be heard on this or any other motions? I do just want to make one question. I know one of the gentlemen on the finance committee, Greg Balizarian, because I know when we were on the capital planning together, the sidewalk plow and bucket truck, would we be looking for something new or something that would be economically conservative for
we
us?
already bought these items,
Okay.
and the bucket truck, we did buy a used bucket truck.
Oh, that's right. That's
Yeah.
correct.
So we're just paying for them.
Okay, thank you. Just thought I'd throw that out there. All right. So there's a motion. There's a second.
Up in front of the auditors, by the way.
Oh, yeah. All right. There's a motion and a second.
As
All,
the auditors are sitting here.
yes, the auditors are sitting here. Yes. Is there a, okay, all in favor say aye?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Unanimous. All right. Thank you, Lindsay.
Thank you.
All right, let's see. Next action discussion item is report by Powers and Sullivan auditors. Right.
Step out of the room for a second.
We can
Sure.
go to the next one and then come back.
Yeah.
Yeah, we can come to the next one. All right, so we'll skip around. We did the vote on remaining special town meeting warrant articles. So the next on our
Still
agenda.
one more. We need-
Actually, no. There is one more. I'm sorry about that, because it's Article 1. You have it in your packets. Does everyone what is? Oh, thank you. The Article 1 establishment and fund of new opioid settlements stabilization fund, as presented by the town manager. I know, Scott, you meet with the opioid reallocation committee. Any information on the matter?
whole point on the article is to set up the stabilization fund. We receive money as part of that settlement. To date, we've got over $100,000, I believe, in that. We have no way to actually spend it. So this would be able to set up the fund, and then we could let that committee disperse it. Much along the lines like we do CPA funds, so people will come and apply to the opioid settlement committee with requests, and assuming that they fall into the guidelines that were set forth, we bring it to town meeting and spend it through this fund.
I move we recommend favorable action on Article 1.
All right, there is a motion by Mr. Donovan. Is there a second?
I'll second.
All right, second by Ms. Jesberg. Any other motions to be heard? All right, hearing none. All in favor of Mr. Donovan's motion, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Unanimous. With that being said, all the special town meeting warrant articles have been supported by the Abington Board of Selectmen. Let's see. Let's go back on our agenda. Report by Powers and Sullivan auditors. They're here with us today. Step up to the podium. Come on down.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. My name is Craig Peacock. I am a partner with Powers and Sullivan, the town's auditors. With me is Elizabeth Murphy. She is the supervisor on the job. She's actually more involved or more in the day-to-day operations of the audit, working with your town accountant's office, your treasurer collector's office, assessing, school, what have you. And we're here to talk about the June 30, 2022 audit. Some of you might be saying we might be a little bit later than normal, and I'm going to explain why and why I don't really think it's an issue, to be honest with you. But so what I'm going to do is I'm going to sort of stay at 3,000 feet and give you an overview of the financials. We have 3 reports, just to be clear there. There's the financial statements. There's the schedule of expenditures of federal award programs, which is essentially federal dollars that the town has spent in that fiscal year. And then the management letter. And so I'm going to end with the management letter because I think it's going to help us some context of why we're here a little bit later than normal. So we'll start with the basic financial statements. The town received an unmodified opinion, which is the best that you can get. That is what the town would be looking for. Some of the key components of the financial statements this year, or this year, again, for us, is June 22. But the general fund had essentially, when I look back in preparing for this, and I looked over the last 5 years, the town's general fund has consistently been increasing. In the last couple of years, there's been some significant increases. For June 22, that increase was about $2.1 million on a budgetary basis. Now, as an audit firm, what we've seen, the main driver of that, in some ways, was the COVID pandemic. And the reason being is because so many different grants came out to communities, both at the school level and the town level, where those funds were able to be utilized for a lot of items that might normally just be in the normal operating budget. So we saw, as a town in fiscal 22, great collections. Again, real estate, personal property, 98% collected in the first year. Most other revenue sources, very good collections in the first year. But because of all the various COVID grants, and we saw this amongst our clients, again, the grants were able to be utilized for a lot of those expenditures that may have gone through different departmental general fund budgets in fiscal 22, which allowed essentially about 1.5 million or so of after encumbrances and articles carried forward to essentially be dropped to the bottom line in the general fund for fiscal 22. So it is a little bit of an anomaly seeing $2 million hit the bottom line in the general fund in 1 year. But again, we've seen this across the state of Massachusetts throughout this COVID pandemic, more so 21, 22, when you know, a lot of the different types of grants, both town and school, were coming out. Another big elephant in the room that we're always talking about is GASB 74, the other post-employment benefits. This year, the town saw about a $20 million decrease in that reported liability in fiscal 22. Now, what we've seen, the main driver of that is that the feds have been increasing the discount rates along the way, the interest rates. So when your actuary sits down to work with town personnel, determine the assumptions to be used, we're able to increase the discount rate by almost 2 points. So the town of Abington went from about 225 to like 4.09 based on, they have to look at the 10, 20-year bond rates as well as what is the actual discount rate the feds are giving. And that increase alone in 2%, it's huge. If we looked in the actual notes to the financial statements each year, a required disclosure is, here's the current liability recorded. What would it be if that discount rate was 1% higher or 1% lower? And it's really amazing what 1% does to the overall liability. And so with the ability for the actuaries to have been going up a good solid 2%, that made a huge difference in the town's overall carrying liability for the other post-employment benefits. Currently, he's about, as of the end of fiscal 22, there was just about 300 grand put aside in the OPEB trust. The town's been working on a plan to, you know, continually put some money into that and such. It's currently, again, not mandated to be funded. I think what we're seeing is more and more communities are working to put something aside. I would say the town is definitely being proactive in doing so. I think if we compare to the peers, maybe the 275 to 300 is starting to be a little on the low end. But again, till the mandate is there to fund, what many communities are doing is working with their actuaries and saying, you know, once we hit our pension numbers, we'll kind of reallocate some of those appropriations over to the OPEB side and try to work it from that way. So we're seeing many different, we've had a couple of clients which have done some pension bonds. It's not maybe the most recommended way to cover your pension side and then move to OPEB, but a couple of communities have done it over the last few years with varying results.
Have they had to get special legislation?
Yes, sir.
Because I know the city of Brockton just did that, and I believe when they refinanced that, they're funding their public safety building as a result of that.
Yes, you're correct. They do have to get special legislation to issue pension bonds. Yes.
Okay. And did they do it from, they took the total obligation, put it out, and then paid it into OPEB?
Well, that is a community by community decision.
Right.
Now, I have seen some that have worked with their actuaries to say, once pension is fully funded, we're going to take 100% of it. I would suggest that the majority have been, you know, the pension appropriation is generally a good sized number. Mm-hmm. So they're using maybe 50% and utilizing some of those funds elsewhere within the operational budget.
Right.
But again, that is a decision community by community. There's no law either way that needs to be followed.
Could I ask you, usually when I look at a balance sheet, my eye goes right to unrestricted revenue. And I know, and I don't know how this is reported. Now I've been out of it for a while, so bear with me.
All right.
On FY22, the unrestricted revenue is roughly, round numbers, 3.9 million. Is that inclusive of any of the enterprise funds, or is that solely the general fund?
Sir, may I ask what page you're on? Just so I
9.
make sure I'm looking at the right page.
Page 9.
Page 9, thank you. I'll make sure we're looking, because again, these financials have 3 different bases of accounting.
Yep.
There's budgetary that the town utilizes, there's the modified accrual basis, and then page 9, page 9 is what we call our MD&A, or the town's MD&A, and that's kind of describing what went on throughout the year, and those figures are representative of the full accrual basis of accounting.
Yep.
So in these columns are accounting for every accrual that the town might have to make, whether it be on the expenditure side, compensated absences, OPEB, net pension liability. On the revenue side, it's looking at things, if there's mass school building projects going on, it would include 60-day receipts, various other types of receivables, depending on where the grants land. So these numbers are the full accrual basis, and the 3.9 you're seeing as change has nothing to do with the town's enterprise funds. That is strictly the governmental funds only.
Does this include any of the ARPA money?
Yes, sir, it would.
So the unrestricted revenues would be inclusive of the ARPA money?
That is correct.
Okay.
That is correct.
Okay, I'm sorry, I didn't mean that.
No, by all means. Feel free, again, any other questions, feel free to jump right in. The other large liability we're always talking about is the GASB 68, the net pension liability. We saw in fiscal 22, again, just to reiterate or to mention, pension systems are on a calendar year basis, where your community's financials are on a fiscal year basis. So for fiscal 22's financial statements, the pension systems are being reported as of 12/31/21, which realistically, if we all think back, was a pretty good investment market at that point in time. It was early 22 when things started going haywire from there, and have continued slightly. But so because of that, we've seen our pension systems in fiscal 22, but as of December 31/21, actually have positive results because of the investment income that they've been able to generate. So for the town of Abington, you saw a decrease of $4 million in your net pension liability in fiscal 22's financials. The caveat to that is, what are we now seeing for fiscal 23's financials? We're seeing the big losses in the retirement systems that started occurring in 22. Again, this next set of financials will be reported for the pension as of 12/31/22. So I just did one the other day. A large city will say that in 22 gained about $53 million in investment income, and they have a loss of 29 and change for 20 as of calendar 22. So we're seeing it went up for calendar 21 in the systems, and it's coming down in 23, kind of evening it out is what the actuaries generally try to look at. I think any of us that maybe work, do some of our own financial planning or work with our financial planners, even on a personal note, actuaries are the same way. They're never going to say you're always going to get 15%. We're looking at the average over a 30-year window, and you have some good years, some bad years, and they'll hopefully average that 6 to 10% range type of thing. So again, we'll see it go down in 23 a little bit. When we look at the town's general fund budget, structurally operations are sound. What we've seen, again, we saw still a consistent 96 in 22 was 98% first year collections of real and personal property, which you really, that's excellent. You can't ask for more than that. If you look at all the other categories, of revenues. Their collections are strong. We look at the expenditures, even though there was the anomaly of utilizing the COVID funds in fiscal 22, we've still seen that the town is working towards spending their budget appropriately. What I mean by that is we as auditors have to do tests of encumbrances and such that are carrying forward. We're no longer, in many, many communities, it was a little loose years ago, but we're seeing lots of controls that have been put in place. Items that are being encumbered to be paid in the subsequent fiscal year have a true commitment to purchase a good or service, and there's supporting documentation to that information, so we're really happy there. Debt service, right now, we know it's gone up a little bit with the new school and such over the last few years, but it's about 7.3% of the overall general fund budget back in fiscal 22, which from our standards and working with both Moody's and S&P and understanding what they look at as far as increasing or decreasing a community's bond rating, we're very happy at the 7.3%. You're right in line with where you would want to be. And quite frankly, we've seen up to 10% be a number that the rating agencies are okay with. What they look for is management, overall management of the community, your plan. They know that reserves are going to be used. They know that we have to maintain our infrastructure and spend money occasionally. They're just looking, does the community have a plan in place to rebuild reserves if they have been used? Or how are we going to, what's our capital improvement plan? How often are we going to be taking debt for these type of projects? They look at the planning from the community quite a bit goes into it, not just the fact that you've utilized some funds or you have incurred some debt. Town has $3.2 million as of June 30th in their general stabilization fund, which is excellent. Continues to, it's maintained the level for a few years prior to that with gaining investment income. However, we have not seen the town dip into it for one-time or ongoing expenditures. So that there is, that's there for a rainy day, which is really what it's for. And in the financials, it kind of leaves us with the enterprise funds, water, sewer, golf, and cable. Realistically, an enterprise fund, or as us auditors call them, we refer them to as business type activities. Any business type activities, the premise of it is that the user fees charged to the users of whatever type, whether we're talking water, sewer, golf, what have you, should be sustainable to cover the operational expenses. It should essentially operate as a business of its own. At times in communities we see they need small general fund subsidies occasionally, but here 3 out of the 4 had net increases in fiscal 22, sewer being the only one that lost it, but it was $39,000, and quite frankly, the enterprise fund business type activities are what we call full accrual statements, so they include all the debt that those funds might have, both the capital assets, which conversely then means also the depreciation expense, which is a non-cash expense, so it's not really how the departments are budgeting, but the statements are full accrual and they're looking at best/worst case scenario of that particular fund. And the reason sewer lost money in that year, we saw an increase in user fees, a slight decrease in operating costs, but the depreciation expense was high enough to offset the net. So it was really depreciation that caused the loss of $39,000. And honestly, that's the high level of the financials. Before we move to other reports, I can answer any or drill down anywhere if any members of the board have any questions at all.
No, my only questions are going to be on the management letter. So.
Okay. If with none, we'll move forward. I'll just hit the federal report because that's a really quick one. Again, the federal report shows that as of fiscal 22, the town spent $3.9 million of federal dollars. And that's everything from your school lunch program to your school grants, to police and fire grants, to council on aid. It's every federal dollar that gets expended from the town in a particular fiscal year has to get reported on that report. 3.9 million was reported. We have to, there's a process that auditors go through to determine, I won't bore you with all the details, but depending on the level of expenditure of a particular grant, it could be considered a type A program, or a type B is a smaller program, and there's certain rules that the feds have. And so for this year, being fiscal 22, again, we had to audit the child nutrition cluster, which is essentially all of the food service programs that the town operates. That was $1.5 million, or about 39% of the overall federal expenditures for that year. We had no findings or question cost, and again, that report had an unmodified opinion. So that, again, is the cleanest opinion that you can get on your federal dollars there. That leads us to management. What I'd like to do is just give a quick overview, and then if you like to drill down into any comments, most definitely we can. Fiscal 22, the town, well, let's say 21, 22, there was a lot of personnel changes. We had new accounting staff, new treasury staff, new assessing staff. That's a big deal. Those are your three, at least in town hall, other than school, your three primary offices that not only keep the town running, but also provide 90 or more % of the information we need to conduct the audit. Now, yes, the audit got released and issued later than normal, 3 or 4 months or so. And then I think we're a little bit longer here just because it was everybody, it was a little tough over summer to get everybody together. But realistically, and Elizabeth, tell me if I'm wrong, but what I saw was that Andrew came along and had been working in accounting. Your previous town accountant had been here for quite a while. It started doing a really good job getting a handle on accounting, the reconciliation side of it. Then all of a sudden you had a new treasurer and a new assessor. And at least treasury and accounting, there's a lot of functions that go hand in hand there. The reconciliation of cash, expenditures, revenues, debt, you name it. You're essentially reconciling almost the whole general ledger together in many ways. Mm-hmm. And there was a lot of new things. There was items uncovered that maybe they wanted to, your new staff, your new team members wanted to understand. They were continually calling us as the town's auditors for questions. We noted this. What do you think? Here's the way we're going about it. Does it make sense? So, although it was a little bit later, I feel that your new team members really worked well together, well with us as an audit firm, but worked to develop an understanding of what they are doing and were doing then and have continued to evolve. But what are the important aspects of their particular offices? What's needed for financials? What's needed for the board's information and monthly meetings and that type of stuff? So again, I do guess it was later, but I don't feel it was because anybody was slacking off, lack of a better way to say it. They were working hard together and constantly asking questions. I know they were working upstairs as well, all departments working together. I couldn't have asked for more, really. They were calling me with questions all the time, calling Elizabeth with questions all the time, and ultimately, it made for a set of financials for 22 with much more integrity than they may have had if everybody rushed to get us facts and figures. And then now in 23, now we're just kind of getting underway in 23, but generally when you get these procedures implemented and in place, they really start to work themselves out. The departments work well together. And I don't want to say things are easy because there's always an anomaly, there's always something that comes up. But when you implement reconciliations on a monthly basis, let's say for cash, and all of a sudden you have a month where there's something wrong, well, it's so much easier. And I think we could all, I reconcile my own bank account at home. And if summer comes and I skip 3 months for whatever reason and I see a little up, I transpose the number, it takes a whole lot longer to find it then than if you're doing it on a monthly basis. So again, I'm more than happy to drill down into any comments here, because any of the older comments, we see that 2 are fully resolved.
Yes, I have a question from Mr.
Yeah,
Donovan.
if I could, I understand,
Definitely.
I understand the findings, I understand the management response, and I guess from my perspective, I want to move forward and maybe only because you got to understand this is what I used to have to do. I used to have to supervise this, so I understand it implicitly. I guess the question becomes, and I get the staff turnovers, and this is not critical of anybody. I think moving forward, I want to make sure a couple of things. One, I would hope and strive for that the books are closed by September 30th, period. I think the second point is the reconciliations have to be done on a monthly basis, because if it's not done on a monthly basis, then you can get so far behind, it's almost impossible to dig out. We went through this in this town when I was on the board many years ago, and when we had an elected official, and it was very, very tough, because year after year after year, we were having findings that nothing was reconciled. So I guess my question to the town manager is that moving forward, and I get this, and it's, in my view, it's a one-off. This is what happened. I guess the question is, okay, now the staff has been entrenched a little bit longer, and I guess moving forward, if they need, outside help to come in and direct them in that capacity, I have absolutely no objection to that, because I've had to do it myself in my other capacities, and I realize it's a fact. I guess I would ask you, Scott, how will we, I guess the question I would have right now, how are we with FY23? Have we closed the books as we sit here today?
So close to closing FY23.
We're getting there, yes. Working with an outside company.
So yeah, we're working with CLA, which is an outside company that's come in, and they've been working with us for several months. And again, those books are pretty much ready to be closed. We're going to continue working with CLA, so it's going to be sort of an ongoing outsourcing.
Okay.
And we're also looking as part of our going into the next budget cycle is I believe that the workload there probably warrants another part-time person.
How are we doing with the reconciliations?
We're currently reconciled through May, and we're almost done with June 30th.
Okay. If once you get caught up, I guess the question would become is to make sure it's done on a monthly basis. And I guess, and the only reason I say this, again, I'm not being critical. I understand it probably a little bit better because I used to have to deal with this. So I just want to make sure we don't lose sight of the ball, if you will. The minute we take our eyes off of it and you start to slip back, believe you me, it can become horrendous to try and dig out from underneath. And then that's when mistakes are made, you don't catch stuff, and it just turns into an overall issue. So my end comment is this. I think we, and for the minutes, I think we have to strive to make sure that the books are closed on or before September 30th. And I think we have to strive for, once we get caught up, the monthly reconciliations. And that would be, in my view, a perfect world. So I think that's a goal we can look forward. I'm happy to hear that, you've got people assisting in that view. And I think if we just keep moving in that direction, we should be fine. But I would just ask everybody to keep that in mind as we're moving forward. That's all I
I
have.
couldn't agree with you more. I mean, yeah, those are great points.
Very good. Well, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Donovan. If there was anything else you wanted to touch upon in the management letter.
I mean, overall, I think what I would say is coming into fiscal 22, there were 5 comments that we had from the previous year, of which 2 of them were fully resolved in fiscal 22, dealing with the recording of tailings and bond premiums. And then there are 3 others, student activity funds. I know the school has obtained an audit of those, of which when we were here, the report had not been released, so we're due in about 3.5, 4 weeks to start fiscal 23. So we'll be looking for a copy of that from the school at that time. One we had recommended for a number of years is the OPEB trust fund of money. Maybe look into a conservative investment policy. You know, it doesn't have to be in all stocks. Again, that's for your investment advisor, but to maybe try to earn a little more on that than just as in a money market. And framework for assessing cybersecurity and IT risk. And it's been happening. I've had a couple of clients in this year that have been compromised. And they sometimes are the clients that you feel have the most robust IT department. So I'm not a hacker, but boy, they're smart.
Oh, yeah.
And they know what they're doing, and that means that communities, businesses, the dollars will never stop going into cybersecurity and understanding that process. Now, I understand the town has obtained cybersecurity insurance and then is looking to, I'm not sure if it occurred in 23. Again, I'm just kind of getting into 23, but was looking to have a firm come in and do an assessment of your controls. You know, I've had them done at other communities. They walk through and everybody has their password pasted to their computer screen, and you know, they look for all that kind of stuff. And but so again, getting insurance is a great start, and going the next step of having a review done of the internal control policies and procedures surrounding the IT world within the town of Abington is the next great step. Okay. And the 4 new comments, realistically, in my opinion, all as an audit firm, especially when we're a little late, we have to kind of bring up to the governing body, if you will, what we see and the reason that we were later with the audit. But again, in working and speaking with both your treasurer and accountant along the way, I think we're going to see all of these cleared up this year, if you ask me. If they're not fully cleared, there's going to be at least what we call a very good partial clearing, meaning lots of progress has been made. Maybe just that last I dot wasn't dotted at that point. But the 4 new ones, I feel they were important to bring up to explain why, again, we're a little bit late and what was going on with turnover and that type of thing. But I feel that your team was working very well together and asking very good questions, which I think is going to make 23 and forward a smoother, not only just for us as an audit, but for the town manager getting the board getting their financials and that type of stuff. I think, and as Select Board Member Donovan mentioned, the once you get those recons going, they work well. And I agree with you. You don't want to go back at that point. It's just a matter of getting those policies in place. Yes.
Good. Thank you.
All right. Anything else from the board? Any comments or questions from the public? All right. If there's nothing else to be heard.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you all for your time. Thank you very much.
All right.
Okay.
And last on our agenda is town manager report. Scott, come on down.
Very briefly, the library boiler replacement bids came in last week. We received 3 bids. The lowest was $243,536.77. That was not what we were expecting, but all 3 bids were in that same area. The highest being 284, and I think the next one like in the 246 area. We are working, and I do believe this will be covered under funds that we have through Plymouth County and the American Rescue Plan Act. And just some of the things, we've been very fortunate to have those funds. Some of the projects we've done on that with some upgrades to the varsity baseball field. Most recently, we've purchased some dugouts for the softball team. I'm waiting to get those put together. There's been actually a lot of work going on down at the softball field, new scoreboards. The parents are chipping in, and they're actually doing work on clearing some of the brush, and we're redoing the fencing down there. So there's a little bit of teamwork and a lot of volunteerism, and it's going to be a nice project when it's done. Some of the other things we put some money into is we bought a street sweeper, 6-wheel dump truck, about $500,000 in roadway improvements. So we continually use these funds. We're using them for, as Crystal has said earlier, PFAS remediation, and using them to help seek potable water sources also. All of our new code red upgrades, website upgrades, social media presence, money into all the parks, the town hall second floor, and hopefully in the near future, our HVAC issues will all be resolved using these funds. So it's a lot. To give you a quick refresher on it, it's in here. In total, we received almost $5 million between $1.7 million or so directly, $3.2 million through Plymouth County. We've been able to get a lot of work done that we otherwise wouldn't have been able to get done, or we would have had to go to the taxpayers for, which we would not want to do. So, just to give everybody a heads up, a postcard will be sent out to all the National Grid ratepayers to notify them of the municipal energy aggregation program that continues. We'll update the website also. Pleased to say that will be roughly 3 cents per kilowatt hour less than the National Grid rate, which is come November will be 0.1821 cents per kilowatt hour. These new rates will take effect in November. It's important to note it's still an opt-out program. So if you want to pay the higher rate, you're going to have to opt out of the program and let them know that you want to pay the higher rate. And just another reminder that this was a program that was voted on and approved by town meeting in 2016. Other than that, as we wrap up or look to get through our October special town meeting, we're also starting to focus on the April Fool's Day 2024 annual town meeting. So we are going to begin the process. We'll ask the department heads to start updating their budgets next month. We'll review the capital plan. And again, luckily, we have some ARPA funds to help offset some of those capital needs that we're looking to get done. And on a good note, Liz Shea, myself, Joanne Zigman from Old Colony Planning Council had a meeting with the Open Space and Rec Committee last week. So we finally kicked off the update of the Open Space and Recreation Plan. Much needed and long-awaited update. We will be doing a survey. We'll be sending it out. Hopefully we'll have it prepared prior to town meeting. So we'll have it through social media, through constant contact. We'll have hand versions of it at the senior center, the library here at town hall, and hopefully a town meeting. But basically a survey asking people just, what do you want to see for open space? What do you do for open space and recreation? And what things do we not provide that you'd like to see us provide? We'll have probably till the end of the year to get some of this information collected, and then we'll start disseminating the data. And right after the first of the year, work on putting that plan back together.
Okay, before I make a motion to adjourn, just am I correct in assuming since the next regular meeting that we would have is a holiday being
October 9th.
October 9th, we won't be meeting until, actually town meeting will be the next time we're together.
Right.
Yes, that's correct. And actually, I think,
Well, I guess
I assumed you would
mean-
meet on the 23rd. And then
Right.
I think if you start looking into the November schedule, you run into like the 3rd and the 4th, or like the 13th and the 27th, which might be tough.
That's fine. I think, if there's, I guess the only comment would be, if there's anything of importance, then we can have a
At town meeting.
8 o'clock or 8:30 meeting, or 4 a.m., I'll be there.
Yeah.
I'm surprised you're not already there for 2 years.
I don't know what
But you-
person you can't get out. But
Yeah. I mean, unless,
I'll bring the donut.
yeah.
All right, I move we adjourn.
All right, there's a motion to adjourn. Is there a second?
Second.
Second, all right. Any other motions to be heard? All right, none. All in favor to adjourn, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? I call the Selectmen meeting to adjourn at 8:35 PM.